My grandma died the same day I got fired and evicted. At her funeral, my parents didn't shed a tear. They were too busy arguing over who'd get what. But then an old man I didn't recognize leaned in and whispered 5 words that rewrote everything I thought I knew about my family. Find what she buried deep. The sky over Westbrook, Tennessee hung low and gray like it knew exactly how much I had lost. I sat behind the wheel of my rusted Honda Civic engine, humming like a tired animal, watching the raindrops smear across the windshield. 14 years teaching sophomore English at Westbrook High, gone with a single HR memo and a 30-second meeting. Downsizing, they said. Budget cuts. But I saw the way Principal Monroe avoided my eyes. He'd been waiting for this. He didn't like teachers who made students think too hard. I turned the key, the engine stuttered, then caught. My knuckles were pale against the steering wheel. The eviction notice from my apartment on the passenger seat fluttered as I pulled out of the parking lot. 30 days past due. No extensions. No exceptions. I hadn't even had time to change before the funeral. I was still wearing the same button-down shirt I wore to school this morning, now crumpled and damp from the humidity. My tie lay balled up in the center console. I didn't know what I was walking into. Part of me hoped maybe my parents had softened, that maybe grief would make them remember I was still their son. That hope didn't last. By the time I reached Maple Hill Cemetery, the ceremony was already in progress. Rows of black umbrellas dotted the hillside, huddled around a white tent where the casket rested. I parked on the side of the gravel road and walked alone through the mud, my shoes sinking with every step. No one turned to greet me. My mother Sandra stood stone-faced beside my father Peter. Her hands clutched tightly in front of her. My younger brother Max was there too. Sharply dressed, hair combed back like he was auditioning for a promotion. They all looked so composed, so untouched by loss. I stayed at the edge of the gathering rain, soaking into my collar. The priest's voice was muffled by the wind, but I caught fragments. Celebration of life, a woman of deep wisdom, beloved matriarch. They buried her without me. When it was over, people began to drift back toward their cars. I stood motionless until only a few remained. A handful of distant cousins. My parents deep in conversation with a man in a gray suit I didn't recognize. Max had already disappeared. That's when I saw him. He moved slowly, cane tapping against the wet stone path. An old man, maybe in his 80s, lean and wiry with sharp eyes under a rain-speckled cap. I recognized him vaguely, maybe from one of Grandma Gloria's old photos. A neighbor. An old friend. He stopped a few feet from me and looked me over like he was measuring something invisible. "You're Caleb, right?" I nodded. "She talked about you. A lot." My throat tightened. I didn't trust myself to speak. He leaned in, his voice barely louder than the wind. "Find what she buried deep." 5 words, that was all. He said it like a secret, like a spell meant only for me. Then he turned and walked away. I wanted to call after him, ask him who he was, what he meant. But something about the way he moved, calm and certain, stopped me. I just stood there watching him disappear between the gravestones like a shadow folding into dusk. I walked back to my car, soaked to the bone. As I opened the door, I glanced once more toward the grave. The tent was being taken down, the casket now resting alone beneath the gray sky. Find what she buried deep. The words repeated in my head, the entire drippy home. Or what used to be home. I didn't even bother going inside. The landlord had changed the locks. My box of things sat soggy outside the door, mostly books, a photo frame or two. My spare jacket was already soaked through. I grabbed what I could, stuffed it into the trunk, and drove. I didn't have a destination, just enough gas for maybe one more trip. I pulled into the Walmart parking lot near the edge of town and parked under the only working light. I sat there in silence, engine off, windows fogging up. My stomach growled, but I had exactly $17 in my checking account and a few quarters in the cup holder. She talked about you. A lot. I hadn't seen Grandma Gloria in almost a year. My parents made visiting her difficult. Said she was confused, said it was best not to upset her with things from the past. But I should have gone. I should have tried harder. She had always been the only one who saw me, the only one who never asked me to be someone else. A car passed behind me, headlights sweeping across the dashboard. I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out the only thing I had left from the funeral. A crumpled program with her photo on the front. She looked proud, not smiling but fierce. Her eyes were always like that, like she knew something you didn't. My eyes drifted down to the name under her picture. Gloria Marie Harlow, beloved mother, grandmother, mentor, and friend. I whispered her name like a prayer, like maybe she could still hear me. And then I started the car. I didn't know where I was going, but I couldn't sit still, not anymore. Not after what the old man said, find what she buried deep. There was something waiting, something meant for me. And I was going to find it. The next morning I woke stiff and cold in the back seat of my car, parked behind a closed-down gas station just outside Westbrook. My neck ached from sleeping twisted against the door, and my mouth was dry with that stale taste that only comes from restless sleep and too much silence. I rubbed my eyes and sat up, unsure if the old man's words from the funeral had been a dream. Then I saw the folded program on the passenger seat and remembered everything. The sky was still gray just like yesterday, and my life was still in ruins. I checked my phone. One missed call from an unknown number and a voicemail. I played it. Caleb, this is Benjamin Cole. I'm your grandmother's attorney. I'd like to meet with you briefly this morning. Nothing urgent, but she left something for you. I'm at my office near Main and 4th, just above the old jewelry store. Come by when you can. His voice was calm, almost too casual for the weight it carried. I got there within 30 minutes. The law office was small, tucked between a barber shop and a dusty real estate office. Upstairs, the place smelled like old books and lemon polish. Benjamin Cole was exactly what I expected. Mid-60s gray suit, polished shoes, not a hair out of place. His handshake was firm but not warm. Thank you for coming, Caleb. I wanted to do this in person. He walked behind his desk and unlocked the bottom drawer. From it, he pulled a thick envelope and handed it to me. Your grandmother asked me to give this to you directly. No one else knows about it. And she was very clear about that. I opened it with shaking fingers. Inside was a folded sheet of thick yellowed paper, brittle at the edges. It was a map. A hand-drawn map with markings in folded ink and what looked like coordinates or codes written along the sides. Beneath the map, wrapped in an old handkerchief, was a small iron key. It was rusted, old enough to belong in a museum. What is this? I asked. Benjamin shook his head slowly. I don't know, and frankly, I didn't ask. Gloria was a very private woman. She trusted you and only you with this. That was her last instruction to me. Do not involve your family. That's her handwriting, right? I nodded, though I couldn't speak. The small note scrawled in the corner of the map simply said, "Trust yourself. You know where to look." I tucked everything back into the envelope, heart pounding. Thank you, I said. I stood to leave, but Benjamin stopped me. Caleb, just so you're aware, the official reading of the will was yesterday. Your parents and brother were present. Of course they were. He looked at me carefully, hesitating. Your name was not mentioned. I stared at him. I wanted to feel shocked, but I wasn't. I felt cold, empty. Are you saying she left me nothing? I'm saying what was read publicly did not include you. That doesn't mean she didn't plan something else. You're holding it. I nodded again and walked out without saying anything else. I drove to my parents' house in the Ridgewood neighborhood. Big house, perfect lawn, American flag out front. Every part of it screamed control and image. I parked down the street and walked not because I cared what they thought of me, but because I didn't want to be noticed right away. The front door was cracked open. I let myself in. The smell of coffee and polished wood hit me first. Voices drifted from the dining room. I stopped just outside the archway hidden by the wall. I heard my mother first. "We'll use the bulk of the money to restructure the foundation," she said. Her voice was sharp, clipped, full of purpose. "And Max?" Peter asked. "What's he getting?" "He'll get his share when he's ready," Sandra replied. "He's still young, needs guidance." "He's 29, Peter said. "Let him stand on his own, like we had to." Max's voice finally joined in. "I don't need a babysitter, Dad. I know how to handle money. I just want it done right." Grandma would have wanted Sandra cut him off. What Grandma wanted stopped mattering when she signed the new will. This is our chance to finally move forward. No more distractions. No more messy emotions. No one mentioned me. Not even once. I was a ghost in my own family's conversation. I backed away, not wanting to hear more. I didn't belong there. I never had. Back in my car, I opened the envelope again. The key felt heavy in my hand, real, solid. Unlike everything else, whatever Grandma left for me wasn't just a trinket or a memory. It was a message, a map, a secret she didn't trust anyone else to find. And now it was mine to uncover. I drove for a long time that afternoon, no destination, just letting the map and key sit on the passenger seat like they were breathing beside me. Every stoplight, every turn of the wheel, I kept thinking of the way my mother's voice sliced through the air. No more distractions, no more messy emotions. That's what I'd been to her my entire life. A distraction, an inconvenience. The map didn't make sense yet, so I parked outside an old diner near the edge of town and ordered a coffee I could barely afford. I stared out the window while the waitress refilled my cup without asking, like she could tell I wasn't here to eat. I remembered the first time I learned to hide my feelings. I must have been 8, maybe 9. I'd brought home a drawing from school, a picture of Grandma Gloria's garden. She used to let me pick tomatoes with her every Sunday. I was proud of that drawing, colored every leaf, every flower. I handed it to my mother, expecting a smile. She glanced at it, then at me, and said, "You need to focus on math and science. This isn't going to help you be anything." That was it. No warmth, no praise, just dismissal. Grandma Gloria, though she framed it, hung it in her kitchen for years. I thought about that as I sat at the dinner table that evening back at the house I once called home. They invited me to stay for one night only because Max insisted. The guest room was still cold, untouched, the bed made like no one had ever lived there. My parents sat across from each other, eating in slunts. Max sat between them, shifting in his chair. Peter cleared his throat and looked straight at me. "So, what's your plan now, Caleb?" I chewed slowly, delaying the answer. I didn't have one. Still figuring that out. He scoffed, shaking his head. "You've been figuring things out since you were 20. Still have nothing to show for it. No career, no family, no direction." Sandra didn't even look up. She sliced her salmon with robotic precision. Max stared at his plate, silent. "I had a career. 14 years teaching." Peter leaned forward. "Teaching doesn't build a legacy. It's barely above volunteer work. You think Gloria worked her entire life so you could waste it in a public school classroom? She respected my work. She pitied it, he snapped. That's why she covered your rent half the time. Don't pretend you earned her support. I dropped my fork. I never asked for money. She offered it. Because she believed in what I was doing, something you never did. Max finally looked at me. There was something behind his eyes. Not quite guilt, not quite pity. Maybe a little of both. Peter shook his head again. You're still a child. You show up late to her funeral. You act like we owe you something. You want a seat at this table, Caleb, then earn it. Stop being a burden. The word hit harder than it should have. Burden, like a label they'd sewn into my skin years ago. I stood up my chair, scraping loudly against the hardwood floor. Thank you for dinner. I grabbed my plate and walked it to the sink, rinsing it out even though I wanted to smash it. Behind me, Max said nothing, but as I turned to leave the room, I caught him watching me. His fork hovered in midair, and for a second our eyes met. He didn't speak, just stared, but his face didn't hold the smug detachment I expected. There was a crack in his mask, something uncertain, like maybe he wasn't as sure about all this as he pretended to be. I didn't stop to figure it out. I climbed the stairs to the guest room and shut the door behind me. My hands trembled as I took the envelope from my bag and unfolded the map again. Trust yourself. You know where to look. I stared at the sketch, the coordinates, the symbols, hoping something would click. A piece of me felt like it already had, like some part of my childhood was buried in the lines on that page, waiting to be remembered, waiting to be understood. I sat there for a long time, the house creaking around me, my family eating and talking downstairs as if I didn't exist. Maybe I didn't to them, not really, but I did to her, and that was enough for now. At first light, I left my parents' house without a sound. The map stayed folded in my jacket pocket, and the key clinked softly inside the glove compartment as I drove out of Westbrook, heading toward the southern edge of Springfield. The roads grew quieter the farther I went, neighborhoods giving way to fields and aging barns, until finally I turned onto a narrow gravel road lined with birch trees that hadn't been trimmed in years. Gloria's old house stood at the end of it, just past a crooked mailbox with the name Harlow still barely visible through chipped paint. I hadn't been here since college. My parents had stopped coming long before that. Said the place was too old, too much trouble. But Grandma never minded the creaks in the stairs or the peeling wallpaper. She said homes had to breathe same as people. The yard was overgrown and the porch sagged slightly in the middle, but the house itself was still standing strong. I found the spare key where it always was, under the rusted pot beside the steps. The door gave a low groan as I opened it. Inside, the air was stale but familiar. The furniture was still covered in white sheets, dust thick enough to write in. I walked slowly, taking in every shadow, every memory tucked into the corners. I stopped at the bookshelf where my childhood drawings had once been framed. They were gone now, packed away or discarded, but I could still picture them. I made my way to the door that led to the basement. It stuck for a moment, then opened with a sharp pop. I flicked the light switch. Nothing. I pulled out my phone and used the flashlight. The stairs creaked beneath my weight. The basement smelled of damp concrete and old wood. Cobwebs lined the beams above, and the cold air settled deep in my chest. I followed the layout in my memory and the markings on the map. Toward the far wall behind the shelves, stacked with canned goods and dusty boxes, was a patch of brick that looked different. Newer, less worn than the rest. I knelt and ran my hand along the seams. There it was. A small indentation, almost invisible, just large enough for the key. My fingers trembled as I slid it in. It turned with a reluctant click. I pulled the section of brick forward, revealing a small metal door set into the wall. Another lock, but this one was broken. I tugged the handle and the panel opened inward with a groan of rusted hinges. Inside was a black safe no larger than a microwave bolted into the concrete. A mechanical dial and a keypad. I sat back on my heels, heart sinking. I had no combination. I stared at it for several minutes, then remembered something. The numbers written in the corners of the map, they hadn't looked like coordinates. More like a date. 03144947. I turned the dial carefully, stopping at each number. It didn't work. I tried again, this time using the keypad. Beep, beep, beep. The light turned green. The door creaked open slowly. Inside was a flash drive wrapped in a velvet cloth and a thin stack of papers bound with a ribbon. Beneath them, a folded letter with my name in Gloria's handwriting. I sat on the basement floor and opened the letter. My dearest Caleb, if you are reading this, then I am gone and you are ready. You were always the only one who saw beyond the surface, the only one who listened with your heart. That's why I chose you. What you found is part of who I was. Years ago, I invested in a company that did real good in this world, even when others tried to use it for their own gain. I transferred my shares to a charitable trust under another name to protect it. That trust is yours now, not for power, not for pride, but for purpose. Do not trust what you hear from the family. They are not who they pretend to be. The truth is buried deeper than this safe, but you have what you need to find it. Confront nothing until you are certain. Let them reveal themselves. Let them destroy each other if they must. But always remember you are the one I trusted. Love always, Gloria. I read it twice, then again. My throat tightened. I hadn't cried at the funeral. Not when they ignored me. Not when Peter called me a burden. But sitting there on the cold concrete holding her words, I couldn't stop the tears this time. I wiped my face and took the papers from the safe. There were ownership documents, transfer forms, and a list of names I didn't recognize. At the bottom was a stamp from a law office in Reno, Nevada. The name on the documents was a foundation I'd never heard of. A nonprofit organization listed as the primary shareholder of a company worth millions. And now I owned it. Not officially. Not yet. But the path was clear. And it started with understanding what she'd built, what she'd protected, and why she trusted me to carry it forward. The drive back into town felt different this time. The envelope was no longer just a mystery. It was a door. And I had opened it. I parked a few blocks from Benjamin Cole's office and walked the rest of the way, head low beneath my hood. The flash drive was in my coat pocket, wrapped in the same velvet cloth I had found it in. I hadn't dared plug it into my own laptop. Whatever secrets it held, I didn't want them traced back to me just yet. Benjamin looked up as I entered, surprised to see me without an appointment. I need 15 minutes and your full attention, I said. He stood, gestured for me to follow him into the back office, and locked the door behind us. Did you open the envelope? Yes, I said. And I found the safe. There was a flash drive inside and documents. She left a letter too. Let me see. I handed him the drive. He plugged it into a small laptop on the corner of his desk, typed a few commands, and sat back as folders began to populate the screen. Most were scanned documents, PDFs, notarized papers, financial reports. One folder labeled Rosewood Foundation caught his eye. He clicked it. A spreadsheet opened. My eyes widened. Initial assets, 11.3 million. Current equity, 16.7 million. Sole control, Rosewood Foundation registered. Reno, Nevada founder, Gloria Marie Harlow, trustee, anonymous. Internal code, GRMC1. Benjamin stared at the screen, then at me. You said no one else knows about this, just you and me? He exhaled slowly. Caleb, this isn't just money. This is structured control, clean, private, legal. She hid this from everyone. Why? Because she knew your parents, he said. She knew what they would do with this. They would cash out, tear it apart, or worse, turn it into a weapon. But it's in a trust. How does that protect it? He pointed to the internal code. If that trustee ID belongs to you, you control the vote. All of it. And from what I see here, the trust is irrevocable. She sealed it permanently in court 10 years ago. Why not mention it in the will? Because public wills can be contested. This is beyond reach. Unless you give it up, no one can touch it. I leaned back, stunned. It wasn't just inheritance. It was legacy, hidden in plain sight. Benjamin clicked through more files, opening a scanned letter from Gloria addressed to an attorney in Reno. In it, she described restructuring her estate into 2 tracks. One public for the family, one private for what she called the soul of the Harlow name. And she left that soul to me. Benjamin turned to me again, his voice low and steady. If Peter or Sandra find out about this, they won't just fight you in court. They'll destroy your name, your past, anything they can twist to make you look unstable or unfit. I already look like the family failure, I said. Then they won't hesitate. Trust me. His words sat heavy in my chest. I had seen my father manipulate investors, charm reporters, and humiliate opponents without ever raising his voice. My mother could kill a man's reputation with a single quote in the paper. And Max, I didn't know anymore. I left the office with a copy of the files on a second encrypted drive Benjamin provided. He insisted I get a burner phone and call him only from unlisted numbers going forward. It felt excessive until I remembered the glint in my mother's eyes at dinner, the way she had cut Max off with a look. They would not take this well. That evening, back at my rented motel room, I turned on the local news out of habit. The anchor was mid-sentence, a smiling blonde with perfect posture. In other headlines, the estate of the late Gloria Harlow has been formally transferred to her surviving son, Peter Harlow, CEO of Harlow Communications. Sources say the will was read privately earlier this week, with all major assets distributed equitably. The family has declined further comment. My photo appeared in the corner of the screen. A grainy yearbook headshot from the high school website. Caleb Harlow. Gloria's only grandchild and former Westbrook High School teacher was reportedly not present at the will reading. Sources say the family remains united during this time of mourning. United. I muted the TV and sat still. They were rewriting the narrative already, painting themselves as a noble, grieving family, and me as the bitter outcast. No mention of the trust, no mention of the truth. I opened Gloria's letter again and read it slowly. Confront nothing until you are certain. Let them reveal themselves. Let them destroy each other if they must. I understood now. This wasn't a fight I could win by speaking. I had to wait, watch, gather everything. Because the storm hadn't hit yet, and when it did, I needed to be ready. The next morning, I drove back to the neighborhood where I grew up. I didn't have a plan. Maybe I was chasing ghosts, or maybe I just needed to hear the truth for myself. The Harlow house stood at the end of the cul-de-sac like a monument to control. The shutters were always painted. The lawn was always perfect. Nothing out of place, at least on the surface. I parked down the block and walked along the sidewalk head low. It was early enough that the streets were quiet, but I saw a curtain shift across the street. Mrs. Patterson. She'd lived there since I was a kid, always watching, always whispering. I slipped around the side of the house, through the gap in the hedges where the fence was loose. That hadn't changed. The kitchen window was open just a crack. I crouched beneath it, careful not to rustle the bushes, and listened. Peter's voice was sharp, irritated. She never should have been left alone after the stroke. We gave her too much space, too much time to think. Sandra poured something. Ice clinked against glass. She signed the new will. That's what matters. Under duress, Peter said. You were there. She could barely write her name. She understood enough to agree. We pushed her. That's what we did, you and I. We cornered her with guilt until she gave in. Don't pretend otherwise. Sandra's voice dropped. She was going to give everything to Caleb. You saw the original draft, all of it to him. That boy would have flushed it down the drain with his idealism. He's not a boy anymore, Peter muttered. He's a problem. Silence stretched between them. Then Sandra again, quieter. Do you think he knows? Peter scoffed. He knows nothing. He didn't even show up on time to the funeral. He's always late, always lost, just like before. The ice in her glass shifted again. We need to stay ahead of this. Watch him. If he starts poking around, we'll handle it, Peter said. I backed away slowly. My hands were clenched so tight my knuckles ached. They had forced her. After the stroke, they'd manipulated her when she was vulnerable, and they were afraid I would expose it. I didn't go back to the motel. I needed to hear a voice from the past that didn't belong to them. I sat in my car and scrolled through my old contacts until I found her. Ashley Holloway. I stared at her name for a full minute before pressing call. She picked up on the third ring. Caleb, hey Ash. I know it's been a while. A long while, she said. You okay? Not really. I don't know who else to call. I just needed to hear someone who knew me before all of this. There was a pause. What do you want? I sighed, pressing my forehead against the steering wheel. I don't want money. I'm not looking for pity. I'm in a place I can't get out of alone. Another silence, longer this time. Caleb, I can't be part of this. Not again. Not after what happened between us. I'm not that guy anymore. Maybe not. But I am still the woman who had to pick up the pieces. I don't blame you for that. I just thought, you thought I'd save you. But I already did. Once. The line went dead. I sat there for a long time before tossing the phone onto the passenger seat. I wasn't angry at her. She was right. She had carried more than her share of my broken pieces. And I had no right to ask her for more. When I stepped out of the car, the neighbor across the street was watering her lawn. She paused, stared, then leaned toward another woman on her porch. Is that the Harlow boy? The one who got cut out of the will? Didn't the grandma leave him out completely? Word is she stopped talking to him years ago. They didn't even lower their voices. I walked away back toward my car. Heart pounding. Every look, every whisper felt like a nail sealing a box I didn't ask to be buried in. They didn't know the truth, and worse, they didn't want to. I started the engine and pulled away before I could hear more. The same street I used to ride my bike down now felt like a tunnel of knives. Everything inside me burned. I wasn't just outcast, I was erased, and I had had enough. I didn't go back to the motel. I didn't even think about it. I drove instead toward the cemetery, past the town center, past the gas stations and billboards, and the life I no longer recognized as mine. The sun was beginning to dip low, casting long shadows across the fields. The cold wind felt like something old waking up. Eli Reese lived in a small trailer tucked behind the maintenance shed near the east fence of the cemetery. Most people didn't even realize someone lived there. I remembered it from when I was a boy, running between headstones with scraped knees while Gloria laid flowers by my grandfather's grave. Eli had always been there, trimming grass, humming hymns like he had nowhere else to be. His porch light was on when I pulled up. I didn't even have to knock. He opened the door with a slow nod. I figured you'd come back. I stepped inside and the warmth of his tiny home wrapped around me like an old blanket. He moved slowly but deliberately, pouring 2 mugs of tea and handing me one without a word. I took a sip and sat at the small table by the window. You knew her better than anyone, didn't you? He sat across from me, eyes cloudy but sharp. Gloria wasn't just kind, she was fierce. People forget that part. She never told me much about the past, because she wanted to protect you from it, he said. And because some stories carry weight, you don't hand them over until the back can bear it. I set the mug down. Tell me. He leaned back in his chair, folding his arms. Before she married your grandfather, she had offers. Big ones. Law firms in New York, a judgeship track. She had a mind like a steel trap, and she could argue circles around men twice her age. But she gave it all up. For what? For you, he said. Not just you, but the idea of you. A legacy that mattered more than courtroom wins. She wanted a family who knew love before ambition. She didn't get that. She did, Eli said. With you. The others. Well, you've seen what they became. He stood slowly and walked to the back of the trailer. I heard a drawer open, papers rustling. He returned with a small envelope yellowed at the corners. She gave me this the week before she passed. Told me to wait until you came back. Not if. When. I opened it carefully. Inside were more documents. An amended ownership file for Rosewood Foundation, now tied to several accounts overseas. Switzerland, Singapore, the Cayman Islands. Names I didn't recognize, shell companies with connections I would need help untangling. It wasn't just money. It was a map of backup plans. One document stood out, a transfer of control clause naming me directly. I stared at it, my chest tightening. She really did it. She gave everything. Eli watched me quiet. She trusted you, Caleb, even when the rest of the world didn't. That's rare. Don't waste it. I felt my throat close. My hands shook as I set the envelope down. Why me? Because you listened, he said. Because you saw her, not just what she gave. You were the only one who ever asked how she felt, not what she could do for you. I wiped my eyes with the sleeve of my jacket, embarrassed. She ever talk about my parents? He nodded slowly. Once. Said Peter had potential once before the greed set in. Said Sandra reminded her of women she used to debate in courtrooms. Elegant, ruthless, cold as ice, and Max. He hesitated. That boy's confused, always has been, but there's a crack in him. Maybe that's where the light gets in. I stood to leave, clutching the envelope like it was a lifeline. Thank you, Eli. He gave a slow nod. Don't thank me. Just do something with it. As I stepped out into the cold, the wind hit harder. But it didn't cut this time. It felt like breath, like presence, like she was still here watching. And for the first time in days, I didn't feel alone. Benjamin didn't waste time. The next morning, we met in a borrowed office downtown, a sterile conference room in a building no one cared about. He had brought everything we needed, already marked and tabbed, a small army of documents prepared for resurrection. We filed the paperwork to reactivate Rosewood Foundation under my name, aligning the trustee position with the legal framework Gloria had laid out years ago. Benjamin moved with calm precision. I signed where he pointed my name, slowly taking ownership of something far bigger than I had ever imagined. He scanned each document into a secure server, speaking only when necessary. This locks it, he said. From this point forward, the foundation is yours, legally, irrevocably. If they challenge it, we have the original filings and the court-sealed structure to back it up. What about the offshore accounts already secured? I had a contact verify their status. Everything matches the documentation Eli gave you. She knew what she was doing. We sat in silence for a moment, the gravity settling around us. I had power now, but it didn't feel like victory. It felt like a final chance to do something right. Benjamin's phone buzzed. He picked it up, listened, and frowned. "You need to hear this." He put the call on speaker. A voice I didn't recognize spoke fast. "The IRS just flagged Harlow Communications. Peter's personal accounts have been frozen. There's a preliminary investigation into misappropriated community grants. Looks like someone tipped them off." Benjamin glanced at me, lips pursed. "You know," I said. "But I don't feel bad either." The voice continued. "Media outlets are sniffing around already. There's talk of a formal audit. If they dig deep enough, this could go federal." Benjamin ended the call and leaned back. "You should disappear for a few days. Let this unfold on its own. The more noise they make, the clearer your silence will become." I nodded, trying to ignore the strange sense of inevitability blooming in my chest. Later that night, as I packed up to leave the motel, there was a knock at the door. Not loud, just one set of knuckles, steady and unsure. I opened it to find Max standing in the hallway, hands buried deep in the pockets of his hoodie. "Can I come in?" I stepped aside, watching him closely. He looked older than I remembered, more tired. The weight of our name sat differently on his shoulders. "I've been following the news," he said, sitting on the edge of the bed. "You didn't leak it, did you know? But you're not surprised?" "No." He looked down at the floor, then back up. "I've known for a while, not the whole truth, but enough. The changes in the will, the arguments, the late-night calls between Dad and Mom, the kind that stopped when I walked in." "Why didn't you say anything?" "Because I didn't know where I stood," he said. "I grew up believing loyalty meant silence. That family meant protecting the lie even when it rotted everything from the inside. And now I'm tired of pretending. I'm tired of watching them destroy everything she built. I know what they did to you. I know what they did to her. So what do you want?" He looked up, eyes clearer than I'd seen in years. "I want to help you. I don't know how, but I choose truth. I choose you." For a long time, neither of us spoke. Then I sat beside him, and for the first time since this all began, I let the silence be enough. There was no forgiveness yet. But maybe there could be something else. A crack, like Eli said. And maybe, just maybe, that's where the light gets in. After Max left, I opened the files. Slowly, deliberately, I showed him everything. The documents, the original will draft, the recordings from the kitchen window. I even let him listen to Peter's voice on tape as he confessed to forcing Gloria into changing her legacy. Max didn't blink. It was worse than I thought, he said. "But I can fix this. I want to fix this." We signed the affidavit. Benjamin filed the petition. The lawsuit went out under my name, with Max listed as a supporting witness. By noon the next day, the IRS had already expanded their investigation. Then the dominoes fell. The IRS uncovered irregularities stretching back a decade. Personal expenses hidden under charitable fronts. Peter's private account showed unexplained deposits routed from organizations tied to Sandra's church network. One by one, grants were frozen. Audits launched. Sandra's nonprofit FaithBridge Ministries had its account suspended pending review. Her upcoming benefit gala was canceled. Donors pulled out. News trucks began circling. Then came Peter. He cornered me outside Benjamin's office, eyes red, breath sour. "You think this is justice?" I didn't answer. She was senile. manipulated. You can't build a life on her delusions. She was more clear-headed than you ever were. He grabbed my coat. You don't know what you're doing. I made this family. I built it. Without me, you'd be nothing. A flash of red lights. Two agents stepped forward from across the street. Federal prosecutor's office. Step back, sir. Peter looked at me one last time like he didn't recognize me anymore. You'll regret this. No, I said. You will. He was escorted to a black sedan, doors shut, gone. And for the first time since the funeral, I felt the weight shift. Something had cracked, and the truth was starting to pour through. The courtroom was cold, not in temperature but in silence. Peter sat 2 rows ahead, shoulders stiff, his tie crooked. Sandra clutched a worn leather Bible but didn't open it once. Max wasn't there. He had moved out 3 days before the hearing. No forwarding address, no phone calls. The judge read through the charges: fraud, coercion, misuse of non-profit funds. Each word landed like a nail in the coffin of the family name I used to carry like a chain. I didn't speak. I didn't need to. When the ruling came, it was swift. Assets frozen, bank accounts seized, Peter's properties placed under federal review. Sandra's ministry dissolved, their social circle collapsed overnight. Outside the courthouse, cameras flashed. Reporters shouted questions. I walked past them all. That night I sat alone in Gloria's study. The same room where she taught me how to read, where she first whispered that kindness wasn't weakness. Her portrait hung above the fireplace, and I could almost hear her voice. I'm proud of you, she might have said. Or maybe I just needed to hear it. Benjamin handed me the final transfer forms the next morning. Everything Gloria had left behind, every dollar and deed and share, was now under my name. It didn't feel like power. It felt like weight, responsibility. What do you plan to do with it? He asked. I didn't hesitate. Give it away. He blinked. To who? To kids like me. And that's how the Gloria Legacy Fund began. We opened the first scholarship application in early spring. The inbox was flooded within days. Single mothers, foster kids, teenagers balancing jobs and homework and dreams. I read every story. I cried more than once. I didn't go back to teaching. I couldn't. That chapter was over. But I started visiting schools, quietly, anonymously, leaving checks behind, meeting guidance counselors, setting up mentorship programs. One school in particular reminded me of my own. I sat in the back of an auditorium once, watching a boy recite his poem about invisible fathers. I stayed until the lights went out. Springfield changed too. With Peter gone, his old networks crumbled. People stopped pretending. Some apologized. Most stayed quiet. That was fine. Max called once. Just once. Said thank you. Then hung up. I didn't call back. Some wounds don't close, but you learn to live with them. And some nights I still hear Gloria's voice. Keep going, Caleb. So I do. I turned Gloria's old house into a reading room. No signs, no publicity, just shelves, cushions, light, and a cracked welcome mat that still read, Home in faded red paint. It took weeks to clear out the old furniture, repair the roof, and repaint the shutters. I did most of it myself, quiet work, good work. The first kid showed up on a Tuesday, a girl maybe 8 or 9 dragging her little brother by the arm. They didn't say much, just looked at the shelves wide-eyed. I let them pick whatever they wanted. I didn't ask names. They came back the next day, then brought friends. By the end of the month, it was a small crowd. Shoes piled at the door, backpacks strewn across the hallway, laughter echoing through the rooms. That had once been so still. I bought more books, built more shelves. One afternoon, I found a letter folded neatly beneath the donations tray, handwritten, no return address. A mother, single, working nights. Her son had never picked up a book until he walked through my door. Now he read at breakfast, at bedtime. She said he smiled more. I folded the letter and kept it in my wallet. In April, Eli passed. I didn't know until I received a package from the nursing home. Inside was a small notebook and a short note on yellow paper. "You did good, kid." That's what she wanted. Not the money, the legacy. Let it grow. The notebook was filled with stories he never told me. About Gloria, about her sacrifices, the careers she gave up, the friends she walked away from, all for me. For the boy who read too slow and cried too easily. I lit a candle that night and left it by the window. Sometimes the dark doesn't leave all at once. It leaks out slowly day by day. That summer, a teenage boy painted a mural on the fence. His idea. A tree with books for branches. Faces of all the kids who came to read carved into the bark. He called it the tree that grows backwards. I didn't stop him. One morning I sat on the porch with coffee and watched them come in. Some ran, some walked. A few carried younger siblings. Their parents waited in parked cars, waving tiredly, smiling faintly. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was standing in someone else's shadow. I felt like myself. The building had changed, but the spirit hadn't. I stood near the back of the auditorium watching as students filed into the seats. Some were nervous, others excited. I saw myself in all of them. Wide eyes, shoulders tense with the weight of something unspoken. The Gloria Fund had grown far beyond what I ever imagined. Over 2 decades, we had helped more than 9,000 students across the country. New centers were opening in Detroit, Tulsa, and Boise. But I still came back to Springfield every fall. This was orientation week, and every year I chose one session to visit in person. Not as a speaker, just as a listener. But this time someone recognized me. A girl in the front row raised her hand. Her hair was pulled back in a tight braid, her eyes sharp and steady. "Can I ask you something, sir?" "Go ahead," I said. "What was the moment that changed your life?" The room got quiet, not tense, not awkward, just still. I smiled. It was a memory I hadn't spoken aloud in years, but it had never left me. 5 words, I said. She blinked. What were they? Find what she buried deep. It took a second for anyone to react. Then she nodded slowly as if trying to untangle the meaning. I didn't explain further. I didn't need to. After the session ended, a few students stayed behind. One handed me a note. Another asked if we could start a book circle at their campus. Someone left a drawing on the lectern. It was a tree with books for branches. I walked out into the late afternoon light. The sun hit the pavement in long, golden lines. Across the street, the old corner store had been replaced by a coffee shop. The bench where I once waited for Max had a plaque now. It read, "For those who choose truth over comfort." Back at the house, the reading room was still open. A couple of kids curled on beanbags, flipping through picture books. Their mother stood near the door, mouthing "thank you." I waved, then turned to the study. Eli's notebook still sat on the top shelf. I hadn't opened it in years. I reached for it now, fingers brushing the spine. Inside was one last note scribbled in pencil. Some stories don't end. They just pass hands. I closed the book and looked out the window. This wasn't revenge the way movies show it. No explosions, no dramatic courtroom gasps, just healing. Quiet and steady and true. I hadn't gotten everything I wanted, but I had become someone I respected, and that maybe was the most complete kind of justice. If you've ever been cast aside by the people meant to love you, if your own family made you feel invisible, you're not alone. Your story matters. Share it. Maybe someone else needs to hear it today, just like I once did. Like Comment your story below and subscribe to this channel if you believe silence doesn't mean defeat.